Get her off this coach, Reed. Rufus Vane stood in the road with one gloved hand on the stage door. 6 passengers watched from inside. The woman beside the wheel held a small cloth bag against her skirt and kept her eyes on the dust. She was hired for my brother's kitchen, Vane said. 3 days in, he found out she limps. Slow on the stairs, slow at the stove, slow everywhere. The woman's fingers tightened around the bag. Vane looked at Caleb Reed and smiled. You run the poorest stop on this line. You cannot afford useless help. Caleb had owned Reed's station for 9 years, though owned was a generous word. The bank held part of it. The stage company held the rest by the throat. The stop sat alone on the Wyoming road between Willow Bend and Fort Emery. It had a stable, a bad pump, and a main room where travelers ate whatever Caleb had managed not to burn. His last cook had left in April. Since then he had served hard biscuits, salt pork, and coffee strong enough to lift a horseshoe. Caleb looked at the woman. She was near 30, with brown hair pinned plain and a gray dress mended at both elbows. One boot had a thicker heel than the other. She did not ask him for help. That made him look twice. "What is your name?" he asked. "Nell Porter." "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you keep rooms?" "Yes." Vane laughed. "Ask her how fast." Nell lowered her bag to the ground with care. She would rather set it down than let anyone see her hands shake. Caleb knew that kind of pride. It was the last thing a person kept when nearly everything else had been taken. Some of you know what it is to be judged before you are given one fair chance. You know how a room can decide your worth while you are still standing at the door. Tell me in the comments if you have ever had to prove you were more than someone's cruel first opinion. And stay with us here, because this is where quiet people are finally seen. Caleb turned to Vane. "Why leave her here? My brother paid her a week and wants no trouble. If you take her, she is your trouble." Vane stepped closer. "And hear me well. The company reviews this stop before winter. Poor meals, late teams, one more bad report and we move the contract to Miller Station." Miller Station belonged to Vane's younger brother. There it was. A rope around Caleb's neck. He glanced toward his building. The faded sign creaked over the porch. One shutter hung low. A washtub sat upside down by the door because the bottom leaked. He needed help. He also needed the contract. Nell bent for her bag. "I can walk to Willow Bend," she said. "That is 28 miles, Caleb replied. "I have walked farther." Vane nodded, settled. Caleb did not like the way he said it. He opened the coach door wider. A thin woman held a sleeping child. An old man stared at his boots. Nobody spoke for Nell. Caleb had heard that kind of silence before. It had filled his station after his wife, Mary, died 6 years earlier. People had brought pies, spoken softly, and gone home to warm beds and voices. Caleb picked up Nell's bag. "You can work here for 1 week," he said. "Food, a room, and fair pay. At the end, we both decide." Vane's smile thinned. "You are making a mistake." "That will make it mine." Nell looked at Caleb as if she were checking for a hook hidden inside his offer. He carried her bag toward the porch. Behind him, Vane called, "Do not blame me when she costs you the station." Caleb kept walking. The coach rolled out 10 minutes later. Dust hung in the road long after it was gone. Nell stood inside the main room and looked over 6 tables, cracked plates, and a bucket beneath a leak in the ceiling. "It does not rain often," Caleb said. Nell glanced at the dry sky. "No, I suppose the bucket is only resting." Caleb almost smiled. He showed her the kitchen. It had a stove, a flour bin, and 3 pans. One pan had no handle. The cupboard door would not stay shut. Nell moved slowly, but she did not waste motion. She checked jars, opened drawers, and pressed one thumb against the flour sack. How many for supper? 8 hands from the barn, me, you may be travelers. What do you serve? Caleb cleared his throat. Depends. On what? How close the meat is to spoiling. Nell looked at him for a long moment. Then she rolled up her sleeves. Bring potatoes, and stop using that rag. By 5 o'clock, the station smelled different. Nell heated water, scrubbed the work table, and made Caleb carry a broken crate outside. Her right leg dragged when she turned. Each time pain caught her, she placed one hand on the counter and waited. She never complained. Caleb returned with potatoes and found her peeling onions on a low stool. You can rest, he said. I am working. I can see that. Then why did you say rest? He had no answer. Mary had once thrown a wooden spoon at him for trying to lift a flour sack from her arms. The memory came so fast that he set the potatoes down too hard. One rolled across the floor. Nell stopped it beneath her thick-heeled boot. I do not need you to pretend the leg is not there, she said. I only need you not to decide what I can do before I do it. Caleb picked up the potato. That seems fair. It is more than I was given at Miller Station. She returned to the onions. Caleb wanted to ask what had happened to her leg. He wanted to ask why all she owned fit in one cloth bag. He asked neither. Instead, he fixed the cupboard latch while she worked. At supper, the relay hands came in loud and hungry. Their talk stopped when they saw Nell by the stove. A young driver named Ben leaned toward Caleb. Vane said you took on the lame woman. Nell was close enough to hear. Caleb set down the coffee pot. Her name is Miss Porter. Ben's ears turned red. Did not mean harm. Then do not practice it. The men took their seats. Nell served beef stew with potatoes, onion, and summer beans. She had made biscuits too. They were soft in the middle. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then old Amos Pike wiped his bowl with bread. Miss Porter, I would trade my Sunday boots for another helping. A warm sound went around the table. Nell's shoulders lowered a little. She filled his bowl. When the men left, Caleb found 2 biscuits beneath a folded cloth near his place. I ate, he said. You ate while standing. I often do. That is why your stomach sounds like a wagon with a loose wheel. Caleb sat. Nell poured coffee into a chipped cup and placed it before him, 1 spoon of sugar. He looked up. How did you know? You put 1 spoon in your cup this afternoon. No one had noticed how he took coffee since Mary. Caleb wrapped both hands around the cup. Nell began wiping the table. You should eat too, he said. In a minute. He pulled out the chair across from him. Nell paused, then sat. They ate without saying much. The quiet did not feel empty. Later, Caleb showed her a small upstairs room. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window facing the road. The door sticks, he said. Lift it when you close it. Nell tested it. The hinge is loose. I will fix it tomorrow. She nodded, though her eyes said she had heard promises like that before. Caleb reached into his pocket and took out the iron station key. You will need this in the morning. For the kitchen. For the whole station. She did not take it. You do not know me. No. Vane may come back. He usually does. And if I steal from you, then I will know Vane was right about one thing in his life. That almost brought a smile to her mouth. She opened her hand. Caleb placed the key in her palm. Her fingers closed around it, slow and careful. A horse cried out in the yard. Then came the hard beat of hooves. Caleb went to the window. A rider pulled up beneath the porch. Read, North Bridge is down. The midnight coach cannot cross. Vane says you are to hold every passenger here till morning. Caleb looked at the narrow rooms, the weak roof, and Nell's tired face. The rider shouted again. There are 14 coming. Nell slipped the station key into her dress pocket. What food is left? She asked. Not enough. She lifted her chin toward the stairs. Then we had better count what we have. Nell counted every potato twice. 7 remained in the sack. There was half a loaf of bread, a jar of beans, 3 onions, and enough flour for 1 pan of biscuits. The meat barrel held a strip of salt pork no wider than Caleb's hand. 14 travelers, Caleb said. Plus the barn men. They can eat later. Nell shook her head. Working men should not be punished because a bridge broke. She opened the cupboard again, though nothing new had appeared inside. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. What do you need? Milk. The cow is dry. Eggs. 5, unless the hens have changed their minds. Any apples? A barrel in the shed. Most are bruised. Nell took down a knife. Bruised is not rotten. Caleb went for the apples. By the time the midnight coach arrived, the station had changed. Ben and Amos had carried 2 benches in from the porch. Caleb moved a table against the wall to make room. Nell had put a kettle over the fire and cut the apples into a wide iron pot. The coach came in hard, wheels slipping in the loose dirt. The driver pulled them to a stop and nearly fell from his seat. A woman climbed down first, holding a baby under her coat. Behind her came 2 girls, a preacher, a drummer, an old couple, 3 soldiers, and others too tired to complain until their boots touched the ground. Then they all complained at once. There are only 3 rooms. My wife cannot sleep on a floor. We paid for passage, not a barn. The child has a fever. That last voice cut through the rest. Nell stepped forward. Bring the baby near the stove, she said. Not too close. Sir, move your cases under that table. Girls, take off those wet shoes before you go another step. The drummer frowned. Who put you in charge? Caleb came in carrying blankets. I did. Nell looked at him. It was only a second, but he saw the surprise. Then she went back to work. The baby's mother sat beside the fire. Nell touched the child's forehead with the back of her fingers and asked simple questions. Had he eaten? Had he been sick before the coach stopped? Was he coughing? The mother answered between quick breaths. He is cold and worn out, Nell said. We will warm him slowly. You a nurse? The woman asked. No, but I have cared for sick children. Caleb wondered whose children they had been. He did not ask. Nell split the rooms without argument. The family with the baby took hers. The old couple got Caleb's. The 2 girls and their aunt took the small back room. Everyone else would sleep in the main room or the hayloft. Where will you sleep? Caleb asked her. In the kitchen chair. No. There is work to do. And after. She looked toward the crowded room. The chair is fine. Caleb carried his bedroll behind the kitchen stove and placed it on the floor. Then I will take the chair. Nell stared at the blanket in his hand. You own the station. Tonight nobody owns much. She turned away before he could see what crossed her face. The apple pot sweetened the room. Nell stretched the beans with onions and pork. She cut the bread thin and laid 1 piece in each bowl before pouring the beans over it. Caleb watched her make enough from almost nothing. When a soldier reached for a second biscuit before the children had eaten, Nell tapped his knuckles with the serving spoon. Wait. The other soldiers laughed. The young man pulled his hand back. Yes, ma'am. An hour later, the baby slept against his mother's chest. The girls sat near the stove, eating warm apples from 1 bowl. The preacher lifted his spoon. This is better than the hotel in Fort Emery. It is only apples and sugar, Nell said. It is hot, he replied. That counts tonight. Caleb stood by the wall with his own bowl untouched. Nell noticed. She always noticed. She crossed the room and held out her hand. What? Your bowl. I am eating. You are carrying it. He gave it to her. She set it on the shelf near the stove to keep warm, then pushed a chair toward him with her foot. Sit for 5 minutes. I have horses to check. Ben is doing it. Blankets need. Amos counted them. Caleb looked around. The station was full, but it was not wild. The children were warm. The barn hands knew their tasks. Nell had not raised her voice once. Caleb sat. She handed his bowl back. 5 minutes, she said. He ate while she wiped the work table. Her limp was worse now. The long evening had pulled the strength from her right leg, though she kept moving. When she reached for the water bucket, Caleb reached too. Their hands met on the handle. Nell drew hers back first. I can carry it, she said. I know. Then why? Because I am going that way. He was not. She knew it. Still, she let him take the bucket. Near 2 in the morning, the station settled. Men slept with hats over their faces. The girls had curled together beneath one blanket. The drummer used a sample case as a pillow. Nell sat by the stove, mending a tear in the baby's blanket. Caleb lowered himself into the other chair. You should stop. So should you. I am stopped. For the first time since sunset. He watched the needle pass through the cloth. Where did you learn to handle a room like this? Nell tied off the thread. In an orphan home in Missouri. Caleb said nothing. She folded the blanket once, then again. I was taken there when I was 8. At 15, they told me I was old enough to earn my keep, so I cooked, washed, watched the younger ones. Did they pay you? They gave me a bed. That is not pay. No. Her answer held no anger. That made it harder to hear. What happened to your leg? A wagon wheel. He waited. Nell looked into the stove. One of the smaller boys ran into the yard after a ball. I pushed him clear. I was not quick enough to clear myself. Caleb's jaw tightened. How old were you? 17. Did they fetch a doctor? 2 days later. The fire gave a low crack. The bone healed wrong, she said. After that I was slower. They found another girl for the kitchen. Caleb looked at the hands resting in her lap. Hands that had fed a full station from 7 potatoes and scraps. So you left. I was told to. She picked up the repaired blanket. Since then I stay where there is work. A farm, a boarding house, a hotel kitchen, Miller Station. And when the work changes, they remember the leg. Caleb wanted to say that Reed Station would be different. But one day was not enough to make such a promise. He rubbed his thumb along the chipped edge of his cup. My wife died in the room upstairs, he said. Nell did not offer pity, she only waited. Fever took her in 4 days. After that, I stopped keeping the place the way she did. At first I meant to fix things, then I got used to seeing them broken. Nell looked toward the loose cupboard door. That happens. You understand. I understand a room can stay the same, because changing it feels disloyal. Caleb turned toward her. She was still looking at the cupboard. For 6 years, people had told him what Mary would want, as if death had left them instructions. Nell said only that she understood. The baby stirred in the next room. Nell stood, but her leg gave under her. Caleb caught her by the elbow. For a moment, she leaned against him. Then she found her footing and pulled away. Thank you. He let go at once. You need sleep. So do you. I will wake you at dawn. You will not. That was not a question. Nell gave him a tired look. You are a difficult employer. I have been told worse. She lay down on the bedroll behind the stove. Caleb took the chair and stretched his legs toward the dying fire. Just before she closed her eyes, Nell reached into her pocket and placed the station key on the floor beside her. Not hidden. Not clutched. Simply kept close. At dawn, Caleb woke to the smell of coffee. Nell was already at the stove. You disobeyed me, he said. You slept through your own order. Before he could answer, hoofbeats came from the road. Rufus Vane rode into the yard with 2 company men behind him. He stepped onto the porch, saw the passengers sleeping inside, and found Nell pouring coffee behind the counter. His face hardened. I told you she would bring trouble, he said. Caleb rose from the chair. Nell set down the pot. Vane pulled a folded notice from his coat. The bridge failure delayed company mail. I need someone to blame before the report reaches Fort Emery. His eyes moved from Caleb to Nell. And I believe I have found her. Rufus Vane slapped the folded notice against his palm. The mail coach should have reached Fort Emery before dawn. The North Bridge went down, Caleb said. And this station failed to move the passengers around it. With what? Ben asked from near the door. A boat. Vane turned. No one asked you. The passengers had begun to wake. The preacher sat up from his place against the wall. The mother with the baby stepped from the back room, her hair loose around her face. Nell remained behind the counter. Vane pointed at her. You brought an unapproved worker into a company stop. Then you put her in charge while the mail was delayed. The mail was delayed before she arrived, Caleb said. Vane ignored him. My report will state that Reed Station is poorly managed and crowded with people who have no proper duties. The drummer lifted his hat from his face. That woman fed 14 of us. The old man beside him added, and found beds for those who needed them. The baby's mother came closer. My boy was shivering when we arrived. Miss Porter stayed beside him until he warmed. Vane looked around the room. He had expected tired people eager to blame someone. Instead, he found them watching him. His mouth tightened. This is company business. No, Caleb said, this is my station. Only while you hold the contract. The room went quiet. Vane stepped close enough that only Caleb and Nell could hear the next words. The review will be in 30 days. My brother has fresh rooms, a new stable, and no cripple in his kitchen. Caleb's hand closed at his side. Nell saw it. She came around the counter before he could speak. You should leave, she told Vane. He stared at her. I beg your pardon. The bridge crew will need daylight. The longer you stand here, the longer your company mail waits. Ben coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. Vane's face went red. You will not be here when I return. Nell held his gaze. That is Mr. Reed's choice. Vane looked at Caleb. Caleb opened the front door. You heard her. For 1 second, Vane seemed ready to strike him. Then he put on his hat. 30 days. He walked out, followed by the 2 company men. The sound of their horses faded down the road. Caleb closed the door. The drummer raised his coffee cup. To the woman in charge. A few passengers smiled. Nell did not. She went back to the stove and lifted the kettle as if nothing had happened. By noon, the bridge crew had laid planks strong enough for 1 careful crossing. The coach was loaded again. Blankets were folded. Shoes were dried. The old couple thanked Caleb, then thanked Nell twice. The mother with the baby held Nell's hand. You made a hard night feel safe. Nell looked down at their joined hands. Keep him warm on the road. I will. When the coach pulled away, the station seemed too quiet. Nell stood on the porch until the dust settled. Then she reached into her pocket. She placed the iron key in Caleb's hand. He looked at it. What is this? You know what it is. I know what it opens. Then we understand each other. Caleb closed his fingers around the key. No, I do not believe we do. If I stay, Vane will use me against you. Vane will use the sunrise against me if it helps his brother. You could lose your contract. I could lose it without you. Nell's eyes lifted to his. He held the key out. You were hired for a week. And after, we both decide. You have decided already. I decided you work here until the week is done. I also decided that Rufus Vane does not choose who stands in my kitchen. She did not take the key. Caleb lowered his voice. Do you want to leave? Nell looked toward the road. No. It was the first time he had heard her say what she wanted. He opened her hand and returned the key. Then finished the week. Her fingers closed around it. All right. The next morning, Caleb fixed the hinge on her bedroom door. He did not mention that he had promised. He brought a hammer upstairs, tightened the screws, and planed the swollen edge until the door closed without being lifted. Nell watched from the hall. You remembered. It kept sticking. That is not what I said. Caleb tested the latch again. No, it is not. He carried the tools downstairs. In the kitchen, he found a low wooden stool beside the work table. He had moved it there before dawn so Nell could peel vegetables without standing. She said nothing about it. That evening, his coffee held 1 spoon of sugar. Over the next days, Reed Station began to sound different. There was less shouting from the kitchen. Fewer plates broke. The barn hands washed before supper because Nell sent them back outside if they did not. She made Amos scrape mud from his boots before entering. He complained each time. He obeyed each time, too. Caleb repaired the leaking wash tub. Ben painted the faded letters on the sign. Nell washed the curtains and opened windows that had stayed shut for years. On the 5th day, she found a closed door at the far end of the upstairs hall. Dust lay thick along the frame. She did not touch the handle. Caleb came up carrying folded sheets and saw where she was looking. That room is not used. We need another guest room before the review. There are other things to fix. There are always other things. He placed the sheets on a chair. Nell walked away. She did not ask whose room it had been. That night rain struck the roof. The bucket in the main room filled 1 slow drop at a time. Caleb lay awake listening to it. He remembered Mary standing in the closed room, pinning her hair before the small mirror. He remembered the washcloth on her forehead, the doctor's boots on the stairs. He remembered closing the door after the undertaker left. Before sunrise, he carried the bucket upstairs. Nell was lighting the kitchen stove when she heard him moving furniture. She found him in the closed room with both windows open. The air smelled of dust and old wood. A faded quilt covered the bed. A woman's comb still rested on the washstand. Caleb stood beside it, unable to decide what to touch first. Nell stayed in the doorway. You do not have to do this today, she said. Yes. She waited. Caleb picked up the comb. He wiped the dust from it with his sleeve, then placed it in the top drawer. That can remain, Nell said. He looked at her. We do not have to empty a life to make room for another person. Caleb swallowed. He took one end of the quilt. Nell took the other. They carried it outside and shook the dust from it beneath the morning sun. Neither spoke. When they returned, Caleb moved the washstand while Nell wiped the window glass. By noon, the room was plain and clean. Not new. Not forgotten. Ready. Caleb stood in the hall while Nell straightened the bed. Mary would have liked you, he said. Nell's hand stopped. You cannot know that. She disliked foolish people. A small laugh escaped her. It was the first time Caleb had heard it without weariness behind it. He smiled before he could stop himself. Nell looked away and smoothed the same corner of the sheet twice. On the 7th evening, Caleb placed her wages on the kitchen table. Nell counted the coins. This is too much. It is what the last cook earned. Did the last cook sleep in a room and take meals here? Yes. Then you overpaid him too. He was a poor cook. Nell pushed one coin back. Caleb pushed it toward her again. Fair pay. She studied his face, then put the coin with the others. My week is finished. I know. Outside, the relay horses moved in the dark stable. A loose shutter tapped against the wall. Caleb poured 2 cups of coffee. I need someone to keep the rooms, cook the meals, and stop Amos from bringing half the road in on his boots. That may require 2 people. I cannot afford 2. Nell wrapped her hands around the warm cup. How long? Until winter, then we decide again. Vane may remove the contract before that. He may try. She looked at the key hanging from a cord at her waist. I will stay until winter. Caleb nodded once. He wanted to say more. Instead, he pulled out the chair across from him. Nell sat. The next morning, a rider arrived before breakfast. Company review has been moved, he called. Vane is coming tomorrow with the district owner. Caleb went inside to tell Nell. Her room door stood open. The bed was made, the washstand was bare. Her small cloth bag sat packed beside the front door. Caleb stood over Nell's cloth bag. It was tied shut with the same narrow cord she had carried from Miller's station. Her spare dress was folded inside. Her comb rested on top. Even the few coins from her first week had been wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Nell came from the kitchen carrying a basket of eggs. She saw him beside the door and stopped. You heard about the review, Caleb said. Yes. So you packed. The district owner will not approve of me. You have never met him. I have met men like Vane. Caleb picked up the bag. Nell set down the eggs. Leave it. Where are you going? Willow Bend. I can find work at the hotel. The same hotel that sent its washing here because you clean linen better than they do. Nell's mouth tightened. That does not mean they will hire me. No, it means your plan is poor. She reached for the bag. Caleb moved it behind him. For the first time since she arrived, Nell looked angry. You said we would both decide. We did. You decided I should stay until winter. I decided I should not cost you the station. You are not costing me anything. Vane moved the review because he knows I am here. He moved it because he is afraid the owner will see what this place looks like when it is properly run. Nell glanced around the main room. The curtains were clean, the tables no longer rocked. Fresh straw filled the floor cracks near the door. Ben had painted the sign, though one letter leaned lower than the rest. It was still a modest station, but it no longer looked abandoned. Nell spoke quietly. If I leave before they arrive, Vane loses his reason. He will find another. Then let him find one after the contract is safe. Caleb looked down at the bag. How long has this been packed? She did not answer. Nell. Her eyes moved toward the road. I never unpack everything. Not here. Anywhere. He set the bag on the table. So you wake each morning ready to be sent away. It saves time. The plainness of her answer struck harder than tears would have. Caleb untied the cord. Nell stepped toward him. Do not. He removed the folded dress and placed it on the table. Then the comb. Then the wrapped coins. Nell's face went still. What are you doing? Making you unpack. You have no right. No. He stopped. She was breathing fast now, not from anger alone. Caleb pushed the bag toward her. You are right, I do not have that right. Nell looked at the empty cloth bag between them. Caleb picked up her folded dress and held it out. But I am asking you to put this in the room upstairs, not beside the door, not under the bed, in the drawer. Why? Because you work here. That is not enough. The words slipped from her before she could stop them. Caleb lowered the dress. They stood with the table between them. What would be enough, he asked. Nell looked at the key hanging from the cord at her waist. I do not know. Hooves sounded outside. Caleb placed the dress back on the table. Then do not leave until you do. He went to meet the riders. The district owner was a broad man named Walter Grady. His coat was dusty, and one side of his mustache had gone gray before the other. Rufus Vane rode beside him. Vane looked past Caleb at Nell's belongings on the table. His smile returned. Good, he said. She understands the situation. Nell came forward before Caleb could answer. I understand that you enjoy speaking for other people. Grady removed his hat. Miss Porter, is it? Yes, sir. I heard there was some trouble here during the bridge delay. There were 14 cold passengers and not enough beds. That is not what I asked. It was the only trouble that mattered. Grady studied her. Then he looked at Caleb. Show me the station. The inspection lasted 2 hours. Grady checked the stable roof, the water pump, the guest rooms, and the feed bins. He asked Ben about team changes. He asked Amos how often meals ran late. Amos scratched his beard. They used to run late plenty. Vane smiled. Amos continued. Not since Miss Porter came. Vane's smile vanished. In the kitchen, Grady opened the flour bin and checked the stove pipe. Nell answered every question without trying to please him. How many travelers can you feed? He asked. 20 with notice. And without notice? 14 if Mr. Reed keeps apples in the shed. Grady glanced at Caleb. Caleb said, I keep apples now. At noon, Nell served chicken stew, brown bread, and coffee. Grady ate 2 bowls. Vane ate 1 and complained that the bread was heavy. You took 3 pieces, Nell said. Ben left the room before his laughter escaped. After the meal, Grady sat at the front table with Caleb and Vane. Nell cleared dishes nearby. Vane opened the attack at once. Reed hired her without company approval. She is physically unfit for station work. Her presence creates risk. Grady watched Nell lift a stack of plates. What risk? She cannot move quickly. She moved quickly enough during the bridge delay. That story has grown in the telling. The front door opened. The preacher from the stranded coach stepped inside. He had returned with a mail pouch for Fort Emery. I heard the review was today, he said. Vane rose. This meeting is private. The preacher ignored him. He placed the pouch on the table. 14 people spent the night here when the bridge went down. Miss Porter fed them, found beds for the sick and old, and kept frightened children calm. Mr. Reed backed her every choice. Grady looked at Vane. You left that out. The bridge delay is not the issue. It is exactly the issue, the preacher said. A station is not measured on an easy afternoon. Nell stood with a dishcloth in her hands. Caleb saw her avoid looking at anyone. She did not know how to receive praise. Blame had always been easier. Blame told her when to pack. Grady leaned back. Reed Station keeps the contract through winter. Caleb released a breath. Vane's chair scraped the floor. On what grounds? Clean rooms, sound horses, better food, and witnesses who say the stop served them well under pressure. Vane pointed toward Nell. You are allowing a crippled kitchen woman to decide company matters. The room went silent. Nell folded the dishcloth once. Then again. Caleb stood. Grady spoke first. I am allowing the keeper of this station to choose his own staff. Vane stared at him. This will fail by snow. Then we review it after snow. Vane snatched up his hat. At the door he turned toward Caleb. You chose badly. Caleb looked at Nell. No, he said. I finally chose help when it was offered. Vane left. The preacher followed Grady outside to see to the mail. Caleb and Nell were alone in the main room. The quiet truth is that some people do not fear hard work. They fear believing a door is open, only to hear it close behind them again. That is why stories like this matter here, because being welcomed once is not the same as being asked to remain. Nell picked up the plates. The contract is safe until winter. Yes. You no longer need to argue with me. I did not know that was tied to the contract. She carried the plates to the kitchen. Caleb followed. Put your things away. Nell turned. That sounds like an order. It is a request. Her eyes searched his face. For how long? Caleb looked toward the window. The road ran pale beneath the afternoon sun. In a few months, snow would cover it. Coaches would arrive late if they arrived at all. He could promise winter. He wanted to promise more. As long as you choose to remain, he said. Nell's hand went to the iron key at her waist. She stood there for several seconds. Then she returned to the main room. Caleb stayed in the kitchen, giving her space. He heard the cloth bag open. A drawer slid out upstairs. Then another. That evening, Nell sat across from him at supper. She had changed into the spare dress that had lived inside her bag for so long. The sleeves were blue. Caleb tried not to stare. You dislike it, she said. No. You keep looking at the sleeve. I have not seen it before. That is because it was packed. I know. Nell lowered her eyes to her plate, but a small smile remained at the corner of her mouth. After supper, Caleb found her on the porch. The air had turned cold enough for breath to show. He placed a shawl over the back of her chair. She touched the cloth. This belonged to Mary. Yes. I should not wear it. She hated being cold. Nell looked at him. Caleb rested his arms on the porch rail. She would say a shawl folded in a drawer is doing no good. Nell drew it around her shoulders. They watched the last coach of the day disappear toward Willow Bend. Neither spoke until the road was empty. Then Nell moved the second chair closer to his. Not much. Only the width of a hand. Far to the north, a line of dark clouds gathered over the hills. The first snow came 3 weeks early. The first snow covered the road before breakfast. By noon, it had buried the porch steps. Caleb stood at the stable door, watching the white sweep sideways across the yard. The wind had changed twice since sunrise. Each time it changed, Nell added another log to the kitchen stove. "Storm will worsen," she said. Caleb looked over his shoulder. "You can tell that from a stove." "I can tell it from the chickens. They went under the shed before the snow began." "That is not very scientific." "They are dry, you are not." He brushed snow from his coat and came inside. Nell had prepared the station without being asked. Water buckets stood full beside the wall. Bread cooled beneath a cloth. Blankets hung over chair backs where the stove could warm them. Caleb noticed her right boot near the hearth. The thick heel had split along one side. "You cannot wear that." "I can until the storm passes." "It may come apart." "It has before." Caleb took the boot from her hand and carried it to the workbench. Nell followed in one stockinged foot. "I need that." "You need it repaired." "There are chores." "Sit." She folded her arms. Caleb looked at her. Nell sat. He cut a strip of leather, warmed it near the stove, and fixed it tight around the heel. His hands were better with harness than shoes, but he worked slowly until the boot stood firm. Nell watched him pull the last stitch. "You do not have to mend everything I bring through that door," she said. "No." "Then why do you try?" Caleb set the boot at her feet. "Because some things should have been mended sooner." She looked at him for a long moment. Then a coach horn sounded through the storm. Caleb was on his feet before the second call. The stage came out of the white with 4 horses laboring in deep snow. Ben ran from the barn. Amos followed with a lantern, though it was barely afternoon. The driver leaned over the box, his beard crusted with ice. "Wheel took a stone near Dry Creek," he shouted. "Axle is holding, but not for long." Inside were 9 passengers, a schoolteacher with 2 boys, a miner with his arm in a sling, a widowed woman, 3 cattle buyers, and a young man traveling east. Rufus Vane rode beside the coach on a gray horse. He dismounted and stamped snow from his boots. "Fresh team," he told Caleb. "They leave in 20 minutes." Caleb stared at him. "The road to Miller is closing." "It is 10 miles. In clear weather." "The mail must move." Nell helped the schoolteacher bring the boys inside. One child had no gloves. She wrapped his hands in the edge of her apron. Vane saw her. "You are still here." Nell did not look up. "The child is cold." "I was speaking to Reed." Caleb opened the coach wheel cover and checked the axle. The wood had split near the hub. "This coach goes nowhere tonight." Vane stepped beside him. "Put the passengers in the spare coach." "The drifts are already at the south markers." "My brother has rooms ready." "So do I." Vane lowered his voice. "You think one good review makes you safe. Grady expects that mail in Fort Emery tomorrow." "It will not reach Fort Emery if the coach overturns." "You will change the team." "No." The word landed between them. Vane glanced toward the passengers gathering at the windows. "You are refusing a company order in front of witnesses." "I am refusing to send people into a storm that can kill them." Nell came to the porch. "The wind is moving north," she said. "The low ground beyond Dry Creek will fill first. If they leave now, they may not see the crossing." Vane laughed once. "A kitchen woman is giving road orders." "She has eyes." "So do I." "Then use them," Caleb said. Vane's face hardened. He walked to the gray horse and pulled himself into the saddle. "I will ride to Miller and bring back men who know how to obey." Nell stepped off the porch. "Do not go alone." "I would rather ride alone than take advice from you." He turned the horse toward the south road. Within moments, the snow swallowed him. The highest cost was no longer a contract. It was whether pride would put a man in the ground before nightfall. Stay here, because the next choice would show who Caleb trusted when there was no safe answer left. The station filled quickly. Nell gave the two boys dry socks from Caleb's drawer. She moved the miner close to the stove and made the cattle buyers carry wood before they sat down. Caleb checked the road every few minutes. By dusk, Vane had not returned. Ben came in from the stable. Gray Horse came back. Caleb was already reaching for his coat. The animal stood by the fence, reins dragging, one stirrup torn loose. Nell touched the horse's neck. Snow had frozen in the mane. He did not turn back on his own, Caleb said. No. Ben lifted a lantern. I will go with you. Nell looked toward the road. Nothing remained beyond the yard but moving white. You will lose the markers, she said. We cannot leave him. I did not say leave him. She went to the barn and took down the long rope used for tying pack horses. She fastened one end around the porch post. Caleb understood. We follow the road with this. As far as it reaches, then tie another length. Amos brought 2 more ropes. Nell wrapped a scarf over Caleb's mouth and pulled it tight behind his head. Keep the wind on your left going out, she said. If it shifts, stop, do not guess. Caleb took her hands. They were cold despite the kitchen heat. Stay inside. I will hold the line. Ben can. Ben is going with you. He looked at her face. There was fear there, but no confusion. Caleb nodded. All right. Nell tied the rope around his waist herself. Caleb and Ben stepped into the storm. The rope pulled behind them, the only straight thing in a world without edges. They passed the road marker, then the low fence, then the cottonwood that stood near the creek. At the end of the first rope, Caleb tied on another. Snow reached his knees. Vane, Ben shouted. The wind tore the name away. They found the saddle first. Then a boot print nearly gone. A dark shape lay beside the creek bank. Vane was on his hands and knees, trying to rise. Blood marked one side of his face. Caleb dropped beside him. Horse threw me, Vane said through chattering teeth. Can you stand? I do not need. Caleb pulled him up. Vane fell against him. Ben tied the rope around Vane's waist. They turned back, each step harder than the one before. Halfway to the station, the wind shifted. It struck Caleb's right cheek. He stopped. Ben shouted, keep moving. Caleb remembered Nell's words. Do not guess. He pulled the rope. It ran behind them tight and sure. This way. They followed it home. Nell saw the line move from the porch and called Amos. Together, they hauled until 3 figures came out of the white. Passengers rushed forward. Vane was carried inside and laid near the stove. His lips were blue, his hands would not open. Nell knelt beside him. Warm water, not hot, she said. Blankets beneath him, too. Vane tried to push her away. She caught his wrist. You can dislike me tomorrow. He stopped fighting. Caleb stood by the door, breathing hard. Ice coated his coat and lashes. Nell looked up at him. Your face. I am fine. You are not. She rose, took his arm, and led him to the kitchen. His right cheek was pale and numb. Nell pressed warm cloth against it. Caleb flinched as feeling returned. You listened, she said. To what? You stopped when the wind shifted. I said I would. No, you nodded. Those are not always the same thing. Her hand remained against his cheek. Caleb covered it with his own. I trust you, Nell. She became very still. The kitchen door stood open. Voices moved in the main room, but neither of them turned. Caleb lowered his hand first. At dawn, the storm broke. Sunlight struck the snow so hard it hurt to look at it. The passengers gathered on the porch while Ben checked the damaged axle. Vane came outside with a bandage above his eye and a blanket around his shoulders. Grady's district sleigh appeared on the north road soon after. Vane watched it approach. Then his eyes dropped to the iron key hanging from Nell's waist. "When Grady hears you refused my order," he told Caleb, "this station is finished." Nell reached for the cord. Caleb caught her hand before she could lift the key away. "No," he said. The sleigh stopped at the porch. Walter Grady stepped down and looked from Vane's bandaged face to Caleb's hand over Nell's. "What happened here?" Vane smiled without warmth. "Exactly what I warned you would happen." Walter Grady climbed the porch steps without brushing snow from his coat. Behind him, 2 district men waited by the sleigh. The passengers gathered near the station door. Even the 2 boys stood quietly, wrapped in blankets. Rufus Vane pulled his blanket tighter. "Reed refused a company order," he said. "He held the mail and kept a coach here after I told him to move it." Grady looked toward the road. Snow covered the south markers almost to their tops. "You ordered that coach out in this." The storm had not reached its worst. "It had reached enough," Caleb said. Vane pointed at Nell. She interfered again. She gave road instructions with no authority. Nell stood beside the porch post. The iron key rested against her blue dress. Grady looked at Ben. "What happened?" Ben removed his hat. "Mr. Vane ordered us to change the team and send the coach south. Mr. Reed checked the axle and refused. Miss Porter warned that Dry Creek would fill with snow." "Did it?" "Past a man's waist." Amos spoke from the doorway. Vane rode out anyway. His horse came back without him. The passengers shifted. Vane looked toward them, but no one lowered their eyes. Grady turned to Caleb. "You went after him." "Ben and I did." Nell touched the rope still tied around the porch post. "We kept a line to the station." Grady followed it with his eyes. It crossed the yard and vanished beneath fresh snow. Vane stepped forward. "That proves only Reed's poor judgment. He risked 2 more men because this woman frightened him with talk of wind." The schoolteacher came out from the crowd. "She did not frighten anyone. She kept us alive." One cattle buyer nodded. "She had water drawn, food ready, and beds arranged before the coach stopped." The miner lifted his good hand. "And Reed was right about the axle. It split when Ben moved the coach into the shed." Grady looked at Vane. "Did you inspect it?" "I know coaches." "That was not my question." Vane's anger weakened. "No." Grady walked to the shed. Everyone waited while he examined the broken axle. When he returned, snow clung to his boots. "That coach would not have reached Dry Creek." Vane said nothing. "It might not have reached the first marker." The preacher stood near the rail. "Mr. Reed chose people over a schedule." Grady removed his gloves. Then he faced Vane. "You will no longer oversee Reed Station." Vane stared at him. "You cannot mean that." "You will return to Fort Emery. Your brother's stop will remain open, but you will not use company business to feed a family quarrel." "My brother has the better station." "Then it should not need you to cripple this one." Vane's eyes moved to Nell. "This place will fail because of her." Caleb stepped between them. "No, it survived because of her." The words carried across the porch. She fed travelers when there was not enough food. She made room where there were not enough beds. She saw danger before men with 2 good legs and twice her pride. And when you were freezing beside Dry Creek, she showed us how to find you. Vane's mouth opened. Caleb kept his voice even. "You called her useless before she crossed my door. You were wrong then. You are wrong now." The station had heard insults before, so had Nell. This was different. No one laughed. No one looked away. They watched Vane stand in the same public silence he had once used against her. Grady pointed toward the sleigh. "You will ride back with my men." Vane went pale. For one moment he seemed ready to argue, then he walked to the sleigh alone. When the district men drove away with him, Grady remained behind. He entered the station, drank 2 cups of Nell's coffee, and waited until Ben fitted a spare axle beneath the coach. Before leaving, he spoke to Caleb near the counter. "The winter contract is yours." Caleb nodded. Grady glanced toward Nell, who was folding blankets by the stove. "And if you have sense, the station is hers as much as yours." Caleb looked at the key at her waist. "It has been for some time." That evening, after the passengers left and the storm clouds broke apart, Reed Station fell still. Nell swept snowmelt from the floor. Caleb carried in wood. They worked around each other without speaking. At last, Nell removed the iron key from its cord. She laid it on the counter. Caleb stopped. "What are you doing?" "The danger has passed. The contract is safe." "That key has nothing to do with the contract." "It did when you first gave it to me." "No, it had to do with trust." Nell wiped her hands on her apron. "You trusted me for a week." "I trusted you before supper that first day." "You did not know me." "I knew Vane wanted me to see you as a burden." Caleb set down the wood. "And I knew what it looked like when someone had been turned away too many times." Nell looked at the key. "You said I could stay as long as I chose." "Yes." "What happens when you no longer need help?" Caleb came to the counter. "I need help every day." "That is not what I asked." He rested both hands on the wood between them. The stove ticked as it cooled. A horse struck one hoof against its stall. Caleb had spent years speaking only when work required it. He knew how to ask for feed, harness, nails, and time. This was harder. "I do not want you here because you cook better than I do," he said, "though you do." Nell waited. "I do not want you here because the rooms are clean, or because Grady approved, or because you saved Vane." Her fingers touched the counter's edge. "I want you here when there are no travelers, when the road is empty and nothing needs fixing." Caleb put the key in her palm. "I want you here because this place is no longer home when you are not in the room." Nell closed her fingers, but her eyes filled. She turned away. Caleb did not touch her. After a moment she said, "I do not know how to believe that quickly." "You do not have to." "What if I keep expecting to be sent away?" "Then I will keep asking you to stay." She looked back at him. "For how long?" "For as long as it takes." Nell gave a small, unsteady laugh. "That could be years." "I own a station. I am accustomed to delays." This time she laughed fully. Caleb moved around the counter. He held out his hand, not to guide or steady her, only to ask. Nell placed her hand in his. Winter held the road for 4 long months. They did not rush what came next. Caleb learned to leave the kitchen door open when he worked in the stable because Nell liked hearing the horses. Nell learned that he went silent near the date of Mary's death and did not force him to speak. He repaired her boot again. She made him sit for breakfast. On cold evenings, they shared the porch chairs near the stove. The space between them grew smaller without either one moving them on purpose. In early spring, the preacher stopped overnight on his way north. The next morning, with Ben and Amos as witnesses, Caleb and Nell stood in the clean front room. Nell wore the blue dress. Caleb wore a coat that pulled across his shoulders. Their vows were plain. When the preacher asked if Nell would make Reed Station her home, she looked at Caleb. "I already have." Afterward, Amos cried and blamed smoke from the stove. Ben hung early wildflowers beside the faded sign. Nothing else changed that day. There were horses to water, bread to bake, a broken strap waited on the workbench. That was how Nell liked it. By late spring, the snow had left the road. At dawn, Nell came downstairs before Caleb. She crossed the quiet main room and stopped at the front door. The iron key slid into the lock. For years, she had kept her belongings packed so she could leave without troubling anyone. Now her blue dress hung in the upstairs drawer. Her comb sat beside Caleb's shaving cup. Mary's shawl rested over the back of Nell's chair. She turned the key from the inside and opened the door. Caleb came from the kitchen, carrying 2 cups of coffee. One held a spoon of sugar. He handed it to her and stood beside her on the front step. Far across the bright road, the first coach of spring appeared over the ridge. Nell touched the key in the lock. Caleb's shoulder rested lightly against hers. Behind them, Reed Station waited with warm bread, clean beds, and 2 chairs at the table. The coach came closer. This time, Nell did not stand at the door wondering whether she would be allowed to remain. She was the one opening it.